All right. Well, welcome to episode 5 of the Diaries of a Black Girl in Foster Care podcast. We are so excited to be joining with you all from different states and bringing our own perspectives on today's topic, which is Pride, LGBTQ plus A month, and Juneteenth. And we definitely want to highlight that even if you don't identify as a woman, a girl, or female, that this is still a space for you, and you know, really tune into the conversation and know that you are safe and validated in this space.
Yeah, thank you. I'm definitely feeling extra gay this month. I don't know about you all, but it is just a really good time of month. As Angela mentioned, that it's Pride Month and it's uh, Juneteenth. My name is Amani Myers, and I'm also going to be moderating the conversation with Angela, and I'm going to allow everyone else to introduce themselves. So, Tasha, would you like to go first?
Sorry, I was muted. Hi, everybody. I am Tasha Robertson Wing, and go by she, her, hers pronouns. And I'm currently in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm just happy to be here.
Awesome, awesome.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alexandria Ware, and my pronouns are she, her, and I am in Wichita, Kansas. And I'm going to turn it back over to Amani so she can introduce our guest.
Yeah, I'd like to introduce our special guest, Courtney. Courtney, if you'd like to share a little bit about yourself, feel free to do so. I know that you're in Wichita, Kansas, but there's so much to you, and I'd love to sort of pass the floor over to you so that you can sort of share about who you are with our community.
Yeah, thank you. So, as Amani said, I am Courtney Price Dukes. I am currently residing in Wichita, Kansas. I serve as an admissions representative at Wichita State University, but outside of that, I have the privilege of serving as Miss Sedgwick County representing Kansas. And I use my social impact initiative, Aging Out to Aging Forward, Fostering the Future, to advocate for foster youth, specifically those that age out of the system. There's about 20,000, I believe, is the number that age out every year. So I do that through going to talk to legislators. I do that through using my own story of being in the foster care system and just educating people about the resources that are right here in the state of Kansas and nationwide.
Hey.
Yes, thank you. We're so glad that you're
Yeah.
here.
Thank you for joining us. And I did not introduce myself. So my name is Anila Quijada Banks, and I'm a transformational speaker, award-winning author of the Black Foster Youth Handbook, and a certified holistic health coach. I am so excited that we have you here, Courtney, to dive into the conversation. But before we do want to kind of create some perspective here on what are these terms, Juneteenth, Pride Month. We know that last year, Juneteenth was just really signed as a federal holiday, which is insane to really think about that it's been so long. And just last year, that became a federally recognized holiday. So Juneteenth is a federal holiday now in the United States, commemorating the emancipation of enslaved African Americans. Juneteenth marks the anniversary of the commencement of General Order Number 3 by Union Army General Gordon Granger on June 19th, 1865, proclaiming freedom for enslaved people in Texas. So shout out to Texas and shout out to Juneteenth, which was this year. And that really brings the question for each and every one of us, which I recognize is, again, a pretty new concept that has been federally recognized. What does Juneteenth mean to you? I'll answer first so everybody can get their thoughts. For me, I think I first started hearing about Juneteenth in high school, but it wasn't recognized as like Juneteenth. It was just kind of shared of what that meant. And then a little bit in college, and maybe like 2020 was when like I saw it more publicized on social media, and it made me pay attention to it more. And I think that for me, Juneteenth represents a lot of different aspects. I talk a lot about in my work about this gatekeeping of humanity. And, you know, for a long time, there was only one version of what being human or even a good person even looked like or felt like. And so for me, it's a lot of that process of what does my blackness look like for me, and also like what does freedom look like to me as a black person, a part of this community, as far as how it's relevant today and that historical aspect and how we see it in our communities today. So I think I'm very much still figuring out like what Juneteenth means for me and in the grand scheme of the world. And yeah, so I'll pass it over to Amani to hear from her.
Yeah, most definitely. So I actually had the opportunity to go to Galveston, Texas, for Juneteenth this past month, which is where Juneteenth originated from. And I would say that it wasn't as lively as I expected, but one of the things that it reminded me of is sort of like this collectiveness that Black people have. And when we come together, doesn't matter how many of us, um, it's just an amazing time. And so for me, it's about the collectivity. It's about being able to come together and celebrate where we've come from, where we're at, and where we're going. And it's also about being able to cook out, listen to music, and just really enjoy yourselves. And so being able to go with two people that I had connected with a couple years ago. We hadn't seen each other since the pandemic. So being able to go together and to celebrate that momentous occasion was really awesome, I would say. And I think that, I'm originally from Boston. So coming from Boston, it wasn't something that was historically celebrated. And so Galveston, it was my first time, ever being in Galveston and being able to just explore and to learn the history of it. It was just really amazing. And so for me, it's about collectivity. It's about gathering together with family, with friends, with community, and just together being able to still celebrate our liberation and our continued liberation. Because, for so many of us, we are like free-ish and we want to become fully free. And so for me, it's about that continual fight that we have to have on a daily basis through policy, through legislation, through movement building, and all of that stuff. So that was sort of my experience, and I was really glad that I got to go to the birthplace of that experience. And I'm going to pass it off to Courtney.
Yeah, so I completely agree with both of you. Like Anila said, I really didn't know much about it until 2020. And that's kind of sad to say because while it is just now being recognized as a national holiday, it's been around. It's not something that's new, but as someone who grew up in a predominantly white area, predominantly white schools, I wasn't taught about any of that, right? So when I finally learned about it, it was so beautiful to see that culture, like Amani was saying, and just gather with people that know my experiences and I don't have to explain anything to them. It's just you get together, you just know, right? Like you don't have to speak about anything, you can just celebrate together. And it's just like this freeing moment to gather together and just be with people that understand you, right? And understand the struggles that you go through on a daily basis as someone who is Black. Because we do go through things mentally, emotionally, whether that's seen by everyone else, it's this mental struggle that we go through. So to have that moment in that space to just celebrate is something that's huge. And I'm just excited that it's finally getting that recognition that it should have had a long time ago. And then I guess I'll pass it to Alexandria.
Thanks, Courtney. I'm gonna shout out Wichita, Kansas, because we've been doing stuff for Juneteenth since I was a wee bitty litty lad, walking in the parades, just having fun. This year we just kicked it. We had our first annual gospel fest, and it was just nice for us to just be a community here in Wichita. So I'll say that Juneteenth is something I've always known, especially being here from Wichita. It's something we do and we do very well. And I love the people who put it on. Shout out to them. It's an amazing committee. And and we just have fun. I mean, we did a gospel fest, we did a barbecue cook-off, we did recognizing fathers on Father's Day, because for the first time since I've been alive and I can remember, Father's Day fell on Juneteenth. So we actually got to recognize our Black fathers, which sometimes, as we all know, people love to say Black men ain't in their kids' life. But you know what? That's a conversation for a different day. I'm not going to dive into that today. Um, but it's amazing. Even here in Wichita, we have a Miss Juneteenth pageant, so it's amazing to see that and be able to understand that, like, this is something that I grew up watching, I grew up doing. Me and my brother always talk about how we were in the parade, going to watch the parade, and just understanding like what it means and to accept our Blackness, because even though we all Black on here, we all different versions of being Black. We all have different versions of understanding Juneteenth and celebrating Juneteenth. So, yeah, I'm gonna pass it over to Tasha.
I'm just gonna keep it real simple. But first, I want to thank you, Ahla, for asking that question, because even though we're a podcast that celebrates Blackness and focuses on Black girls in foster care, it's important to celebrate and uphold Juneteenth, as it recognizes the liberation and freedom for Black people. And I think really, when I think about like how all this ties together, it just brings these different aspects of liberation. But what I really wanted to add is like Juneteenth, to me, is a reminder that as Black people, as the Black diaspora, that at the end of the day, like, we're people that are warriors, fighters, and we're going to be okay. And so I love the fact that we get to come together and celebrate Juneteenth as a reminder of what we've been through, but also where we're going. So to me, it's just another way to come together and celebrate as Black people.
That is beautiful. And thank you all for sharing that. I did want to just also highlight that Alexandria shared so many ways. I always get questions on like, how do we celebrate Juneteenth? And I felt like, Alexandria, you gave a pageant. I mean, all these different ways that, we can engage in the community to uplift Juneteenth, and celebrate the freedom of our people. So thank you all for engaging in that question, and I'm going to pass it over to Amani.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it sounds like we all going to Wichita next year for Juneteenth.
Right.
That is fine with me. Come on.
I'm coming to your house.
Courtney will accept you guys too. We will take them all. Just, come here. We love it. We love a good people.
Awesome. And I think this sort of just transitions into our next question about what is Pride Month? And, as you all know, Pride Month is from June 1st officially to June 30th, but we know that we celebrate it every day. And so for all of us who identify as LGBTQ plus A, we know that it's just sort of like a movement to celebrate our liberation and our freedom. And also it's sort of the original organizers chose June to sort of commemorate the Stonewall uprising that happened on actually June 28th, which was yesterday, 1969. And so as we think about sort of the diaspora even of the LGBTQ movement, I want to ask, what does Pride Month mean for you all? I can go first. So as I mentioned for me, I came out, wow, I won't say the number of years now, but it's been some years. And I remember first feeling as though that it was something I didn't want to do, because I didn't understand why was it that straight people didn't have to come out, so why was it that I had to come out? But I recognized that there was freedom in me just coming out, because I wanted the people in my life, the people in my circle, to sort of understand and to know who was it that I was embodying. And it was definitely a progression. Like I said, I mentioned that I grew up in Boston, but I went to school in New York City for grad school. And I remember feeling as though that I was going to intentionally come out in New York City, and intentionally came out, went to the first Pride parade out in New York. And I remember when I first came out to my brother, I asked him, how did he know, or how did he suspect that I was gay? He said that because he saw me at the Pride Festival. So I guess that's a place where people come out. And for me, it's been a moment of just coming to an experience of self-love. I actually came out officially on February 14th as a way to express my own self-love to myself. And I remember the day before that, I was dating somebody at the time. And so I wanted to be a little creative with it because, again, I was sort of like trying to protest the fact that I had to come out. And I remember posting a photo of us and I said, I'm ready for Valentine's Day. How about you? And I remember the overwhelming response that I got from people who were like, girl, we knew you were gay. We were waiting for you to come out. I just got so many different responses. And in that, it made me feel comfortable to then post sort of like a letter to myself and to the community to share with people that I was, gay, free, and open. And I would say that it hasn't been the quite easiest, but what I will say is that each day I love myself even more. I feel liberated. I will say that Pride here, I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma now, coming from California and New York and seeing how big their parades are, the festivities that happen. Being here in Tulsa, Oklahoma for the first year, I would say that it was very, very hot. So that was a deterrence in terms of being able to really enjoy the Pride festivities. But I really enjoyed being able to hang out with some friends, hanging out with people that I love, and just to mark our celebration and our liberation in a safe space together. And so I'm just happy that even though we have like one day left, I'm gay every day, and so I live that out every day. So yeah, and I don't want to out anybody, so anybody can choose to go and say what Pride means for you.
Honestly, I'm happy that you for what you just provided us with. When I like think of Pride, I think of just a space, and even though this is just a month, this should be all year round, of just accepting people for who they are, loving on people for who they are. And it's like the first time throughout the year that I feel like we're just all human. Like, and just, I don't know, I appreciate Pride. I have fun a lot of the times, but in the recent time, when I think of Pride, I think about like the sacrifices of Black and brown trans women that we don't oftentimes highlight or celebrate. And so I've been really intentional with trying to just learn how I can be a better advocate for trans women, and recognizing my privilege as a cis woman, and how I can show up in spaces. So I think Pride to some is like, fun, but it also shows me or help makes me hold a mirror of what I can do better as a cis woman.
I can go. For me, Pride feels like a big hug to my younger self. So I identify as queer, open. I love humans. That's as simple as it is. And I've known that I was that way for a long time, but I didn't tell anyone. I just kept it very hidden because I grew up with this shame about it. Especially in my high school years, I went to a private Christian school. I was a small group leader, like very involved in church, where a lot of people are Bible thumping that it's not okay to love someone of the same sex. That's it's just not okay. You're going to go to hell if you do that. And that was so ingrained in me that anytime I even thought about anything like that, that overwhelming emotion of shame, that's heavy. It's very, very heavy to the point where, like, I didn't think that I would ever be safe or be open about who I truly was. I didn't think that I was ever going to tell anyone. I was just going to live with those feelings. But eventually in college, I did come out because someone just changed it all for me. And I remember the post that I made where I just let everyone know there's a graduation ceremony that we have at Wichita State University where you get rainbow cords. And I posted a picture with my rainbow cords and I just said, I'm Black, I'm queer, I'm here. And that was it. That was as simple as it was, just to show that there's a lot of statistics that are backed up that I shouldn't be where I am. Like, not only as a Black woman, but as a queer Black woman. There's just so much that I go through on a daily basis. So to have this month, which should be, like you said, every single day of the year, because I'm queer every single day, but to have this month where people are recognizing you and just really showing that support just feels like what I wish I had as a little kid, or what I wish that I recognized was there as a little kid. I mean, I grew up in Missouri, so a red state, right? So it was just very, very hard. So to see that people's mind shifts are changing every single day is something that's beautiful, because as humans, we have a right to feel safe wherever we are, just for being on this earth. So yeah, I'm just very glad that people are continuing to shift their mindsets.
Thank you, Amani, Courtney, and Tashe. I'm going to be very brief. For me, it represents a space of healing and self-expression. Just looking at the things that I have studied around the historical context, even, gay marriage, and how beautiful that is to now be able to legally marry who you love and who you admire and want to spend the rest of your life with. Like, I can't imagine my love of my life, my husband, not being able to marry him because of XYZ reasons. So that's what really comes up for me, and what I think is so beautiful about Pride Month. And having pride in that, right? And not just like the shame and the guilt, but the pride in your self-expression, who you love and who you are. Yeah, that's what I have.
I agree with all you guys. And for me, pride is just very important. I have several non binary friends, and I see the struggles they go through every single day. And for them to be able just to have 1 month to be with their community, and everyone knows in that community that it's okay, it's safe, and not too safe, but it's just safe. Um, and I just love seeing them be able to come alive and be who they are for the whole month, even though all my non binary friends are who they are every day of the year. But it makes my heart happy as an ally to know that, like, people get to love who they want. They get to be who they want to be with. And have being an aunt and having nieces and nephews who are part of the LGBT community. Um, it's very different, and it's very near and dear to my heart, because I have nieces and nephews who care about, those aspects. And especially this generation, they care about people being people. They care about people being humans, and they care about love and light. They don't want to spread negativity. And so pride always reminds me that, it's the next generation taking over to showcase, like, it's okay to be who you are. It is okay, 100%. And there's people who love you no matter what. There's people who are on this call, who are in our community, who you can come out to, and it is a safe space for you to come out. And so it always makes my heart happy during Pride. Even if you need to, like, know more stuff later on, we're going to be sharing some resources, from nationally, statewide. We found a whole bunch of different things, for you to work with young people who are in care, who are part of the LGBT community, but also learn about it yourself and learn how you can become an ally, which we'll get in that later. But you can't just assign yourself the title ally. But again, I said we'll get into that later.
Yes, and thank you for that, Alexandria, because that's going to segue beautifully into Amani. If you can share a little bit, maybe even define for those that are not as clear about what that means, LGBTQ plus A, and other things that may be helpful as well for our audience to become familiar with some of these terms.
Most definitely. And this is just a short list. So there's so much information. I feel like the language is ever evolving. And so just want to be able to put that out there, as I share this. So LGBTQ plus A, and as it includes all others, is an abbreviation for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer or questioning. So these terms are used to describe a person's sexual orientation or gender identity. So when we talk about sex, it's the anatomical classification of people as male, female, or intersex, usually assigned at birth. So when we talk about trans or transgender, it's an umbrella term referring to people with diverse gender identities and expressions that differ from stereotypical gender norms. It includes, but is not limited to, people who identify as transgender, trans women, meaning male to female, which is MTF, trans man, female to male, transsexual, cross dressers, or gender non-conforming gender variant, or gender queer. We talk about gender non-conforming. We talk about individuals who do not follow gender stereotypes based on the sex they were assigned at birth and may or may not identify as trans. So I would say that I would be someone who identifies as gender non-conforming. What is the difference between gender expression and or gender orientation, gender identity slash sexual orientation? So gender identity is each person's internal individual experience of gender. It's a person's sense of being a woman, a man, both, neither, or anywhere along the gender spectrum. A person's gender identity may be the same as or different from the birth assigned sex. In gender expression is how a person publicly expresses or presents their gender. This can include behavior and outward appearance such as dress, hair, makeup, body language, and voice. A person's chosen name and pronoun are also common ways of expressing gender. Others perceive a person's gender through their attributes. So I would say that the way that I identify is as masculine androgynous, and I go by she, they, them. And so those are some of the things that, some of the definitions. Again, there's so much more information out there, and we want to be able to make sure that we encompass it all. But with the time that we have, we're not able to. So I know that there's going to be resources that will be put into the comment section so that you all can have. I'm going to turn it back over to Angela to get us started off into our next section of the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I know it's a very brief vocabulary because, as you said, there's several other words and aspects, but thank you for providing a bit of a foundation there. Let's get into our first question. So, in the spirit of Juneteenth and Pride Month, what do you all think of the word liberation in relation to the way you express yourself? What does that really represent for you? And I'm not going to go first this time. I'll pass it over to somebody else and circle back around.
Should we let our guest go first?
Yes.
We not to put you on the spot or anything, but
No, you're good. So for me, I mean, my car has the pride flag in it. My office at work has pride flag in it. I'm just very open about it. And the reason that I am so open about it and expressing myself in that way is to create a safe space for everyone else so they can see that. Because like I said, when I was younger, I didn't see a lot of that. So I want to make sure that I am that example for other people to say that you can be whoever you want to be, no matter what you look like, no matter what anyone tells you. Because at the end of the day, you're with yourself. So you want to make sure that you are the most comfortable version of yourself, the most authentic version of yourself. So I do that through the clothes I wear. I'm not a big dress wearer, and I advocate for myself in pageantry that I don't want to wear dresses all the time because I feel like they're too feminine for me, right? So that's just small ways that I do it to make sure that at the end of the day, I'm standing up for who I am. My Facebook profile picture for a long time was me just holding the pride flag out, and I got a lot of comments about that. But at the end of the day, you are showing so many people that it's okay to be you. It is okay to love who you love. It is okay to be a Black woman, a Black male in a world that tells you that it's not okay. It's okay to be you. So I do that through just small things, wearing a pride flag pin on my blazers when I go out, just things like that that show people I'm not only in the community, but I'm here to talk to you if you need someone because you might not have that at home.
Thank you. Tasha.
I would say, like, in terms of, like, speaking of reflecting on, like, pride and Juneteenth and the liberation that comes for that, I would say over the last couple of years, we all heard me talk about grad school. How that has been a struggle. But prior to coming to grad school, I was in Washington, D.C., served on the Hill for a little bit, worked in like consultant firms, and my hair was the biggest thing. Like, I always wanted it to be presentable, but as I like get older, I feel so liberated through my hair, especially with having locks. Like, you will have to, get over that really quick. And I feel like it is a form of resistance and liberation for me to not be constrained to what seems professional or appropriate. So I would say definitely my hair, but also how I introduce myself. So when I first started out like working or whatever, my name is Tasha. And so some people can't pronounce it, or I would just cut it short to Shay. So to show like how, I express my freedom and liberation is through making people pronounce my name, say my whole name, and wearing my hair in a style that I feel comfortable with, and just accepting my blackness. And not like, one thing I really struggle with sometimes is considering other people's feelings when it comes to me expressing my blackness. And so just realizing that I'm black no matter what. And if I say anything that offends them, that's on them. Like, I just can't show up any other way but who I am. So
Thank you so much, Tasha. Alexandria, do you feel comfortable sharing next?
Yeah, I agree with you, Tasha. Like once I got locks, it was over from there. Like I remember when I first got them, I was afraid to like show them at work, and I worked in ag, and I was the only black woman in ag in Wichita, Kansas. So like there was all these like, okay, I'm working in ag, people aren't gonna accept my hairstyle. And then like one day I just was with my supervisor and my coworker, and I said, "Do y'all understand? I got a code switch to come up in this office. I have to be a completely different person than who I am." And this lady had the audacity to tell me, well, we all have to code switch to a certain extent. And I said, no, you don't. Because you don't have to worry about if you have braids, is someone going to come touch your hair and be like, oh, your hair's so soft. How did it get so long overnight? No, Becky, please, no, please don't. Don't touch my hair. And it took so long for me to just be like, listen, I have locks and I love my locks. And some days y'all gonna get it where it's retwisted and it looks nice. Some days y'all gonna maybe get the nappy headed stepchild look. But whatever I give you is what you gonna get. But at the same time, it's also been about my clothing too. So as a bigger black woman, we were always taught you have to be put together. You have to dress to the T, to the nine, to be the best. And some days I do not feel like coming into work and being dressed to the nine. Some days you may catch me in some leggings that look like professional wear pants and a t shirt, because that's what I feel like wearing. That's what I feel is comfortable to me. So, really being able to express myself however I want to. If it's my hair, I'm in this stage of the locks where some of them stick up and they don't want to go down, no matter how much water and oil I put on them all day. They just want to do what they want to do. But being comfortable with that, being comfortable to where sometimes I don't want to have to code switch, and I shouldn't have to code switch to make you feel comfortable because you can't handle the truth. So liberation to me isn't just one thing, it's multiple things of how I show up, being able to speak my mind and not care if you like it or not. Like that's not got anything to do with me. Sorry if I hurt your feelings, but really not sorry. So yeah.
can I add one more thing before y'all go on? And I just want to note that I feel like it's important to, explore what like liberation means to us, and as it regards to like Pride and Juneteenth, because like we all know, this is Diaries of a Black Girl in Foster Care. So I want to thank y'all for sharing y'all perspectives. But we might have like young people who are currently in foster care and identify as LGBTQ plus youth, or just Black girls in general. And I think it's important to hear these things so that every day they can take steps towards being liberated in their own right and expressing themselves how they feel comfortable to.
Yeah, no, I love that.
Absolutely.
I love that. And I also love the spirit of just where everyone is coming from in terms of like liberation. And so for me, one of the things I think about when it comes to liberation is sort of uh, having boundaries but no bounds. And so what I mean by that is I remember a time in my life when I didn't feel liberated. And growing up as a plus size person, I remember not really being able to fit into standardized clothing. So I had to go over to the men's section and find clothing because I had breasts and I had a butt. And that's still true today. And so for me, I found that it was always difficult to find clothing that sort of fit my body type. And so I grew up feminine presented, but also kind of like a tomboy. And I just remember one of the ways that I wanted to express myself was through my clothing, because I always was the one that was stealing my brother's clothing, sneaking through his room and taking his sweatpants and his sweatshirts. That was my thing. And so being able to find something that sort of fit my style was something that I was going for. So when I mentioned to you all that I came out specifically in New York, what I mean by that, it was like a process. But so for me, when I came out in New York, I came out in terms of what I wore. So I started to dress more masculine presenting. And for me, that was something that was liberating for myself because I grew up, like I said, I grew up Christian. And I grew up with this idea that you had to wear certain things. You had to always be dressed up. Like Alexandria shared, you always had to sort of be on the nine, on the T's. And so for me, part of me was sort of rebelling against the idea that I actually couldn't come as I was. And so for me, coming up and showing up in my clothing, the way that I like to dress, um, was something that was liberating. I will say that it still hasn't been easy because to this day, I still wear masculine presented clothing, meaning I wear men's clothing. And as someone that has breast and a butt, that's something that's not very accommodating in men's clothing. And so I struggle with finding out and trying to figure out what to do in those spaces. So I have to find means and ways of doing that in how I am. And so I would say that for me, liberation is something that's ever evolving. For me, it's something that I want to continue to push against because I think that for people who identify as plus size, it's really hard. And if you are trying to express yourself in a way that's liberating through the means of clothing, we have to also be liberated in that respect. And so I think for our young kids, our young adults who are sort of going through this process now, I will say that it has definitely evolved over time, but there's still more work to do. And if you are someone that has that grew up in foster care or is in foster care, and we get that clothing allowance, sometimes it's still difficult. So I think as foster parents, as caregivers, as resource parents, we have to be mindful in sort of how we are really making sure that our young people are liberated to the best extent possible.
Absolutely. For me, I would say there's different pieces of my identity as I would think that that's everybody's experience, right? There's different pieces of our identity where we may be more expressive than others. And so for me, in navigating that, I'm a very multifaceted being. I enjoy politics, but I also really enjoy art and my creative side and balancing those different aspects, as well as embracing certain aspects in different seasons of my life. That's been a journey of freedom for myself and feeling most authentic in those seasons of life. And I've also challenged a lot of the different layers of what makes my identity. As a Black woman, do I always need to be resilient and put myself in spaces where I need to be strong? And all these different narratives that I've learned about, had to experience and watch older Black women have to take on, which then kind of ripples into health issues and other things. So how do I break free from what that label even means and how I've seen it portrayed in the past? And then the layer of being a woman and, all these other different things that society puts on just being a woman. And for me, what's been most empowering and freeing is embracing my femininity, and also being able to play around in my tomboyish ways as well. So there's always this duality and expression of myself, and there's not just one aspect of who I'm supposed to show up as a woman. I get to define that for myself. And then the foster care layer of trauma. What does that look like to be free from my trauma? How would I show up? How would I express myself if I didn't have that layer or that lingering idea of foster care and the experiences that I had leading up and in foster care? And also, which was very interesting that I wanted to bring up, was being a married woman at that. And the different things that people box you in as being a married woman, that you need to follow behind your husband. These are, these different aspects that are actually very oppressive. A lot of times, I remember the first time that the first few weeks that I was after my wedding, and people said things to me like, well, I guess your life is over and you're not going to be traveling anymore because you're married. And it just really, really bothered me, because I was just like, how does that change like my ambition and my dreams and my joy because of my relationship status? So I have over the years continuously pushed back and continue to travel solo or with my husband and other things. And I think that's a whole other piece as well, is really looking at in what ways can you free yourself more, and in what ways is society, or these different layers of what society has said, is what determines who you are, and pushing back and thinking for yourself about what that really means for you, how that really resonates with you or doesn't, and being able to really slowly or quickly own that. And from what I heard from all the other panel mates as well, is that, you get to decide that self-expression. You get to, whether that is with a flag or, with how you share and how you show up in the world. So I think for me, that's definitely been a crazy experience, and I'm still unfolding and healing from a lot of the narratives that end up being very oppressive and kind of boxing who we are as human beings, which is multifaceted, which is complex as well, and just an enjoyable human experience in that. So with that, I want to pass it over to Amani.
Yeah, I was gonna say I love what everyone is sharing. Thank you so much for your openness. And so, as we talk about our next question, we're going to talk about what are some of the challenges that LGBTQ plus A youth face in the system. What are some outcomes that can happen if foster youth or those involved in foster care aren't able to express their identity? And anybody can jump off.
So I think that some of the challenges is, even though we look at how far we come, like with Pride Month, and we see all these corporations, jumping on the bandwagon, we still have some of those traditional religious beliefs that can really hinder and cause LGBT youth to suffer if their parents aren't accepting, or and how they like their gender expression or identity or sexual orientation. And a recent study even showed that 30% of LGBT youth report suffering physical violence at the hands of their family members after coming out. And so when I think of the grand scheme of things, say you have a youth who identifies as LGBTQ plus, and then they end up in the foster care system, that's another layer of hardship that they may be facing.
Yeah, I love that you say that. I thought it was interesting too when I was doing some research about the LGBTQ youth. I was pretty actually taken back. I was talking to Angela about this, that I didn't recognize that actually many of the youth that come into the system, like you mentioned, have come to the system because they have not been accepted by their family members. And so that to me was pretty much a shock. And I think that other challenges, like you said, with the whole religious respect to that, is that when we have policies that are in place that continue to oppress people from being able to identify and fully liberate in that experience, that then sort of impacts the young person that's in their home. And so if you have someone that's not even a foster parent or a caregiver who has, quote unquote, willingly taken in a child, but has these beliefs that they believe that being gay is a quote unquote sin, that just continues to enhance the struggles and the challenges that these young people face. And we also know that there is a huge rise of LGBTQ plus A young people who are taking their lives because they're not being accepted.
I think one of the biggest challenges that we see with youth in foster care is when they're aging out, there's a lot more young people who are homeless. We have a lot of young people who turn to sex work, so sex trafficking, all those different things. We also see that they have higher placements. So we have young people who are placed in placements at a higher rate because people don't want to take in a young person who's a part of the LGBT community, which is problematic in itself. And you should not be a foster parent if you don't want to love all young people. And I said what I said, and I will say it again. Um, we also see that there's not a lot of services or programs for these young people when they're in the system just because they are LGBTQ, which again is problematic. And if you have an issue with young people who are part of the LGBT community, you need to get some type of help because these are kids and they deserve love no matter their sexual orientation or their gender expression. So those are some of the issues that I've seen as someone who works in the system and advocates and things like that. That there's not a lot of resources, and whether you are in foster care or not, there tends not to be enough resources or enough protection for our young people.
Yeah, for me, I got a lot of those religious comments when I came out. I remember my foster father at the time telling me that I was going to have to go to battle with God. And then we just had this huge conversation about just how much of a sin it is. And I remember I have a picture of it just bawling that night, just my mental health just being shook by that comment. It still comes to my mind to this day, thinking about, oh, you're going to have to go to battle with God. And just that image of what that looks like to me. And it just affected my religious journey too, just the different layers that come with that, because entering foster care alone, that's trauma. But when you add on this experience of someone that's supposed to protect you and make you feel safe is the one that's making you feel like you don't belong, that's another layer of trauma that's added on to that. If you don't feel supported by people after you haven't already been supported by your biological family or whoever you were staying with at that time. And it really does just affect your mental health and something that you have to continue to peel back even after you're in the system.
Kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, just thinking on like how we feel liberated or how we express that liberation. Imagine being in foster care and knowing like how you want to express yourself, but not being able to. You're going to suffer. Like you're not going to be happy, and that suffering can lead to higher suicidal rates and things that we don't want to see happen, all because they aren't being loved on or put in a position where they can express themselves. Ultimately, the thing is suffering.
Yeah, I like that you all pointed that out. 'Cause I think even just thinking about my experience of before I came out, I think I experienced so much suffering, internal suffering. I remember when I went to San Francisco for the first time to do my social work practicum, and my church family and others. I went to a Christian college, and they were like, don't come back gay. And I remember going to Glide Memorial, which is the largest social service foundation in San Francisco. And I went to a church service on Sunday, and I remember seeing Black, gay, and trans people in the choir. And I remember feeling so guilty sitting in the audience, like feeling so heavy, but seeing them in the choir with their hands raised, looking free as ever. And that was something that I just couldn't understand. And so for me, I remember just all those times I spent, in my room, just crying and praying the gay away and all of that stuff. And nothing happened. And I think that it becomes very much torturous when we talk about how words have power, and we talk about how words have meaning and how they have impact. And we also talk about how sticks and stones don't break our bones. Sticks and stones may break our bones, but words may never hurt. I think that's the biggest lie that's ever been told, because words actually do hurt and words seep. And so it's not necessarily the actions, but it's the words that I had to sort of continue to play over and over in my mind. And I think as somebody who's young, sometimes you're not able to differentiate between sometimes what an adult is saying, between what you're thinking and what you're feeling. And it just can become very tumultuous. And so I think that it's very, very important that as adults, as caregivers, and even as peers, that we are very mindful of how we're talking, what we're saying, the words that we're using. Sometimes we say things and we don't mean them, but you have to also understand that intention versus impact are two different things. And so, even though you may have not intended to hurt, your words hurt and the impact of your words have hurt. And now I have to go through life suffering through that. And so, I feel like as an adult, one of the things that I've struggled with is that being someone that grew up in foster care, I didn't get a chance to necessarily stroke. I didn't get a chance to really think about what it meant to be Black, what it meant to be gay, because I was so focused on surviving. So for me, as a young adult, and growing up, that's some of the things I had to sort through. And so thinking back to the words that adults said to me, those things carry with you. And so for me, I think it's just really, really important how we say things, what we say, and really thinking about our internal motives. If you wouldn't say it to yourself, and even if you did say it to yourself, you got to take a step back and to really think about how your words can create and cause harm. And so I really appreciate that you all have just shared just your experiences, because we know that young people are listening today. And they need to know that they're seen, that they're validated, and that who they are and what they embody is okay.
Absolutely. What I would add on to that is, for everyone listening today that is thinking about becoming a foster parent or engaging with LGBTQ plus A folks, is how could you support and facilitate that healing journey, as well as be a safe space, or create safe spaces for folks that identify as LGBTQ plus A. We're all human. We need a space to just be. And it's almost like daunting that even that piece is continuously lost or confused, or it's not common sense. So I just challenge you all, from the things that our panelists have shared, to really look at yourself and look at your inner beliefs and see if they really are helpful or are they more so damaging to young people's self-esteem and well-being. So with that, how does being LGBTQ plus A affect specifically Black and Brown youth?
I think when we think about Black and Brown youth in foster care who identify as LGBTQ plus A, we have to look at it from an intersectionality lens. So not only are they identifying as Black and Brown, but they're also a part of another subgroup, LGBTQ plus A. And I think we're just now getting to the point when it comes to child welfare that we're acknowledging different subgroups, and it is coming from being a hidden demographic coming into light. And so I say that because though intersectionality tells us that both of these subgroups face disparities, the research and data isn't truly there, is in the making. And so like, we know that we talk about adultification a lot on here for like Black girls, some of the hardships. We know that Black children have longer wait times within the foster care system. So I think when we're thinking about the impact, we have to look at it from an intersectionality lens. So acknowledging some of the hardships from the LGBTQ plus youth may face, but also the Black and Brown. And we think about that, we're literally leaving these youth who identify as both in a very vulnerable state.
I can go real quick. So, one of my last placements, I was actually with a Caucasian family, and that's the family that I came out to. And I remember what she said to me, and it shook me because she said, I don't want your life to be hard. And of course, she's never going to understand the hardships that already came from being a Black woman. But it just kind of made me laugh because she had never said any of that when I was in interracial relationships. And that already adds a different layer of being hard. So that's when I knew, I'm like, no, there's just some homophobia that's there. And there was just this conversation where she was trying to make it sound right, but through that, it just sounded so wrong. I got where she was trying to come from, but it just felt like she was trying to change who I was with the excuse of she doesn't want my life to be hard, when regardless, my life's been hard. My life's going to be hard. So I think in the system, there are going to be people that don't do it right. I mean, nobody's perfect. But also, like Amani was saying, you have to process your words before you're telling them to someone, especially someone in the foster care system, because we overthink, we ruminate on things. That's just what happens when you are faced with trauma. It's a trauma response. So whenever you're going to someone and you want to have a conversation, because it's a big thing. I mean, your identity is a big thing, and it's okay to sit down and talk about that. But what are the words that you're using to communicate that you care about someone? Because telling me that I shouldn't be a certain way that I am because my life's going to be hard, that's not the way to do what you're trying to do. There's a different way to go about that. Um, so I think it was just really hard because I do have those different identities of being a woman, being Black, and being a part of that community. So there is just layers of trauma that are added to it when you're a part of so many different things and so many different communities that in societal's eyes are not accepted.
I'm so sorry I keep popping in here, but Courtney made me think of something. I remember listening to Alexandria talk on a briefing that we did, and she talked about how we have to acknowledge youth in foster care as a whole human, a whole being. And I think one of the most problematic things about youth in foster care is sometimes we have the foster parents, we have the caseworkers, and we have all these moving pieces around them thinking that they know best for the child, but also not seeing them as whole. And so in general, you often hear like younger people coming out and it's like, oh, they're just going through a phase. And I think that is another problematic thing, is because we're not seeing them as whole humans. And so when you add those different intersectionalities, I'm gonna keep going back to that, it really is harmful. So we really have to listen to what youth are saying. If they say they identify this way or this is their sexual orientation, that's what it is. And it's not up for you to challenge that or, add commentary like Courtney said her foster dad did. It's up to you to support them and do what's in the best interest for them.
I absolutely agree, Toshe. And I think one thing that people also have to remember is like you have to think about what are teens typically going through when they're 13, 10, 11, 12 to 19. Their brain's not fully developed till 25. Let's remember that. Is they're going through learning their identity, figuring out their values. So if we're not thinking about, okay, this person is figuring out their identity, as we keep saying, intersexual, sorry, I don't say the word right, so I ain't even gonna try. Um, but you got your race, you got your culture, you got your gender, you have your gender expression, you have your sexual orientation, you have your nationality, because race and nationality are two completely different things, but we like to mix them up together. And that's a whole topic for another day. But that's all a part of building somebody's identity. And if we take that away from youth in care, especially youth who are part of the LGBT community, they never get that chance. And then they're trying to figure it out when they're adults. When being a teenager is supposed to be the safest time for you to figure it out. That's when you're supposed to be able to be like, okay, maybe I like little boys and maybe I like little girls or maybe I like everybody. I mean, who you like is who you like at the end of the day. I mean, somebody used to tell me all the time, which I know the other co-hosts are going to tell me not to say the words, but if you ain't paying my bills, you ain't doing some stuff, it's none of your business. It is none of your business.
No, I agree with you.
Who somebody goes home to is none of your business. And if you got an issue with that, I need you to look deep inside your soul and realize you are the problem. You are a problem in this world, and you need to go to therapy and you need to get some help.
Yeah, I love that you said that, Alex. Especially, a lot of times I find that people don't look within, and you really need to look within. And what you said is that being a teenager is supposed to be one of the safest times for you to really express and to show and to understand your identity. And I think that oftentimes people forget that. People forget what it looks like and remembering what it was like to be a teenager. And so I think that this moves really smoothly back into, what does true allyship look like? And not just what does true allyship look like between the system, bio families, caregivers, staff, and agencies, but what does allyship look like within yourself? I think that we have to start there. And if we start there, I think that we would be able to really truly understand not just our own wholeness, but the wholeness of others. So I'm going to leave you all off with that to sort of state, what does allyship look like? What would you all have liked it to look like? As somebody who's black, as somebody who's queer, as somebody who encompasses all different types of identities. How do you want to be supported?
I think sometimes in our society, if it's not happening in our own backyard, we don't tend to it. If it doesn't directly impact us, or we're not the ones hindered by, some of these legislation policies and things that we're seeing happening, then we're not concerned. And I think as an ally, we're holding space for, the community, even when they're not present or behind closed doors. When we're at certain tables, we're making sure that they're seen and counted on. um, for example, like I know I've been in spaces where we're looking at surveys about identity, but I'm like, how are we looking at identity if we're not accounting for LGBTQ plus a youth? Like, how is this encompassing, you know, identity if they're not even present or shown up? So you have to be bold and using like your privilege to show up from others, even though it may not seem that this is impacting you in the back door. Because either way, you might not see it, but indirectly, we all are impacted by this. So
I know yesterday Courtney and I went to dinner. And something I said, like we always want to talk about like I'm an ally. And I truly believe that you can't say you're an ally unless somebody gives that to you. Because I can say I'm an ally, but what do I do behind closed doors? Do I sit here on this podcast and pretend I'm down for the community, but I'm not doing nothing for the community? I'm not reaching back. In the words of one of my mentors, Danielle Johnson, she always says, if you're the only person in that room who's black, brown, part of the LGBT community, make sure you pull somebody else up that's behind you. So if I'm in this space and I'm not pulling nobody else up, how am I saying I'm an ally? So when I think about being an ally and what allyship looks like is, I feel like you got to be willing to be down for the cause. If I'm getting pulled over and a policeman got a gun to my head, is you gonna jump out the car and stand between me and the policeman? Is you really down for the cause, or are you just you talking about it? Are you about it, or are you not? Are you gonna make sure that there's people at that table who represent that community? Are you gonna make sure that it ain't just talk? You know what I'm saying? Like, how can we move from this of just saying, well, I'm an ally and I share on social media? No, but are you talking to people? Are you in those rooms? Are you making sure that people are there in those rooms that are not represented? Just like Tasha said, we talk about identity, but people who are part of the LGBT community ain't even there. So how you gonna talk about identity if you ain't got nobody there? Like, that's allyship, is making sure you advocating and activating things for people who aren't in those rooms, and making sure, okay, I'm at this meeting and I want you to come with me next time. I'm the only millennial in here in a room full of old people. We need more millennials. That's allyship to me, because that's showing I care about you, and y'all futures. Not just, oh, okay, I do this and I'm going to say I do this. But yeah, I'm going to get off
can
that.
we note that Alexander just said about it? I was triggered by that. Like, to my fighting face. She said about it.
Listen, I'm going to show up as my authentic self. That's what this podcast is about. So, I mean, I said some other things yesterday at dinner that I know y'all are not gonna want me to say. So I changed what I said. So
We love it. Does anybody else want to share?
I mean, I think both of y'all hit it right on the nail. It's about showing up and supporting people even when they're not in the room. And when it specifically comes to being in the foster care system and having that support from the system and bio families, I think it's making sure that the foster youth is getting the resources that they need. I was telling Alexandria this a while ago. I didn't even know there was a foster care bill of rights for kids. I didn't know that that existed. There are so many people in care that don't even know what their rights are. It's because they don't have that proper allyship and those people advocating for them to know that those resources are there right in the open, right in front of them. So I think it's those people that are going to speak up and speak out for you to make sure that you get what you need and what you deserve, because the system's hard. It's messy. I mean, y'all can attest, it's messy. And a lot of people don't understand just how messy it is. So making sure that people are advocating, that you're communicating with your caseworkers, that they're not just making you seem like another number, another case, and they're overload, So that's what allyship is just all around, is making sure that you have people that are going to have your back, regardless of if you're right in front of them or if you're in a different room.
I would just add as well, being open to being educated and the willingness to learn things that you may not have, quote unquote, traditionally been raised on or thought thought through. It's definitely, I come from a background of very Catholic and Christian as well. So there's a lot of things that I've over the years learned about and have kind of released as doesn't really connect with me or this idea of freedom. So just thinking of that in relation to bio families, caregivers, staff, and agencies, the system at large, really recognizing in what ways can you be educated, in what ways, what are the things that you don't know so you can best support, and asking more questions, not to be facetious or antagonizing, but actually to learn to know and find different ways and better ways even to love and show up for those that you claim to be allies for.
Yeah, I love that you said that, especially because even just the process of unlearning. I know that for many of us who have grown up in toxic, chaotic environments, there are things that we've learned that as you get older, you have an opportunity to sort of unlearn those things. And so I know for me, growing up, I was taught that being gay was something that was bad, that was a sin. And so I began to internalize that, and I began to believe that. And so what that ended up doing for me was I ended up beginning to hate myself. And so I think that as I begin to learn and educate, that I'm recognizing that there's such a huge world out there that we don't even know of. It's so expansive, so wide. And being able to have conversations like this with all of you all help us to be able to understand and to learn new and exciting and also uncomfortable things. And so I just want to thank you all for just sharing that perspective, because to our viewers and to those who are listening, we're all in this and we're all learning. And not sure if any of you all have learned or even know that on Wednesday, June 15th, President Biden, as we talk about allyship, this is a step towards allyship. President Biden signed the executive order on advancing equity for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex individuals. And it was a detailed government-wide commitment from the Biden administration to address disproportionate outcomes that impact the health, safety, and well-being of LGBTQ plus I individuals. And so as we talk about what it means to continue to support and advocate and advance the mission, the well-being, the health and safety of LGBTQ plus individuals, we have to think about what that means for young people in foster care. We have to think about brown and Black young people in foster care who are also then even more disproportionate. So I just want to thank you all for that. I want to turn it over to Angela. I know that there's just many resources out there. As we mentioned, it's a short amount of time, so there's only so much that we can get to. But I want to turn it over to you, Angela, to be able to share in some of those resources so that our community can know how to continue to better educate themselves in this process as we celebrate not just Pride Month, but Juneteenth and Liberation. And even though it's just for the month of June, we know that we're liberated every day. And so I turn it over to you.
Yeah, I know we're going to be dropping them in the chat because they are links, but also our co-moderator for today has an amazing book, You Are the Prize, Seeing Yourself Beyond the Imperfections of Your Trauma.
That's funny. On pick your book up.
You know how I am, Amani. You know how I am. And my book, The Black Foster Youth Handbook, 50 plus lessons I learned to successfully age out of foster care. Okay, with a copy on hand.
Yes, no, for real, because when Courtney ever mentioned, I had this on hand from the very beginning, but when Courtney mentioned the fact that she was not aware that there was even a foster youth bill of rights, this is the reason why this book is important. You get what I'm saying? So I have this on deck at all times. So the new Bible.
I appreciate you. Yes, you can get both books on Amazon. You can find it on Barnes & Noble. And as I shared, there are tons of resources and links in the chat as well. We just want to say thank you so much for everyone that has tuned in here today and listening later. You can find us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and all places where podcasts are listened to at Diaries of Black Girl, Diaries FC. And we're excited to continue the conversation. This is the end of season 1, but the beginning of something so exciting and beautiful. And yeah, if anyone else has any lasting remarks.
I have one thing to say about the foster care bill of rights. So not everywhere has a foster care bill of rights. The state of Kansas has a foster care bill of rights. So I don't want any kids listening on here to think that every state has one, because not every state may have one. I do know that the state of Kansas has one, and they are currently working on re-putting it back through legislation so it can become law. So every kid in care will know about those rights. I can't speak to every state, but I can say the state of Kansas has one. And then also just want to say thank you guys for tuning into our first season. And thank you, Tasha, for presenting this idea to me and letting me just be like, yeah, let's do it. And you being on board and trusting that I was like not cuckoo and pushing you to do this. So yeah, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, I was just gonna thank everybody, especially like our co-hosts, hosts, and everybody that has been a part of this. We kind of started like, okay, we're just gonna have a podcast, but we're definitely seeing this is space that is needed, and it's something so special about being able to come in community but hold space for Black girls who have experienced foster care all throughout the United States. I don't know about you all, but when I was in care, I didn't have like that community. So I'm just so grateful for you all just being here and just the opportunity to share space. And it's something that is sacred to me and that I don't take for granted. And I'm just excited for what is to come. And where we're going. So I'm just thankful to everybody. I'm thankful for the people that is actually listening. It feels good to hear about people listening to the podcast. Like, wow, people actually listening to this. So yeah, I'm just thankful. That's where I'm at right now. Just very thankful.
Yeah. And thank you to Courtney for showing up today and being a guest. We really appreciate you sharing your perspective, sharing your advocacy. Continue to keep it going. And thank you to Angela for co-hosting with me. Thank you to Tasha and Alexandria and also Casey just for your dedication and your hard work for this process. I cannot believe we are finished with season 1, and the best is yet to come. So So thank you.
Yes. And with that, we are out.